I remember one guy specifically in Florida, because I asked him, like, tell me about your family, your kids, who's going to inherit your stuff. And he says, well, I've got a son, but what the blank do I I don't want to leave anything to him. They just sit around playing video games all day.
Yeah.
He's like, I want to spend it all before I die. So there's people that are along those lines, but the most of them, especially here in Utah, for whatever reason, cling to that idea of I want to leave as much as I can to my kids.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about that is that if you talk to your kids, they're the opposite. They don't want that. You know, I've lost both of my parents now. And when I look at it, exactly like you're saying, I don't want the $5 in an envelope for each of my kids. I want you to come here for Christmas and be with my kids, right? Yeah. I want you to make memories with my kids. I don't want you to send us $20 to go to Disneyland with. I want you to go to Disneyland with us, you know what I mean? And so that's what I try to encourage people to see is that, look, if you're living on ramen noodles and canned beans because you think you're benefiting your kids by leaving them a few extra $1,000, you're missing the point of what legacy really is.
Yeah.
Legacy is the memories, it's the time, it's the experiences, right?
Today we had Trevor Carlson with Heritage Reverse Mortgage on, a longtime friend and business associate. And just like you guys, Callan's mind was blown. I think he was surprised with how exciting and interesting reverse mortgage is. And we got to talk about Trevor Carlson, the man, and what he's done as an entrepreneur. So I learned a ton today.
Yeah, I mean, we get to know his life story and just how he started this business, the struggles, and he talks about the trials that he has and still has today. We talked a lot about the industry, the reverse mortgage industry now, and how it's struggled with interest rates, but just a really powerful story and podcast, and then a good education, because my mind was changed about reverse mortgages. I had a misconception on what they were and whether they'd be good for somebody. So I think we have good information in here for you. So
this episode is brought to you by Big Storage Ventures. We are now inviting you to team up and partner alongside us. We bring our experience hunting storage deals and maximizing the self-storage asset to provide our partners with cash flow, tax benefits, and appreciation, all in one recession-resistant asset. Leverage our sister company, Big Ben's Moving Service, to fill your facility and give you an edge over the competition. Reach out to bigstorageventures@gmail.com or DM Big Storage Ventures on Instagram to team up. Thanks for making the time, man. We know, where did you just come from? You came from Cedar?
So yeah, I've been in Cedar City all day today, just meeting with clients and partners and that kind of stuff. So
cool. Well, Callan was teasing a little bit before we started recording just about how reverse mortgage, most exciting episode of the year. But I have personally heard the story, and it actually is really exciting. And I want to maybe start a little bit with just before you got into this business, kind of what were some of the experiences that led up to starting this business?
Yeah, so I mean, you're totally right. I mean, when I do like social media stuff about reverse mortgages, it's like, I know there's nobody out there binging this, right? But,
it's on their feed, just nothing but reverse mortgages.
The logarithm is crawling this.
I don't know why I think of old people when I think of reverse mortgages.
Oh, you got it.
Just elderly people. That's just all I think of.
Yeah,
we'll talk about that.
Marketing.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But no, so I mean, just a little bit of background on my professional whatever. So I've been in mortgages for about 16, 17 years. Started this company about 7 years ago. And, you know, it's interesting. My evolution as a professional was like a lot of people. You know, when you're first a professional, you're selling a product, you kind of want to have a wide gamut of things to sell, right? And so most people in the mortgage industry try to sell everything, every type of loan, every type of home, every type of property, all of those kinds of things. But what I realized when I started this company, and what's been confirmed since then, is that specialization is kind of the key. You know, the more laser focused you get on being the master of one thing, I think the more successful you'll be. And so that's kind of
it's a big takeaway. Many people debate like diversification versus specialization. Mm-hmm. And I see wisdom in both, but I too am like a specialized guy. Like I had the conversation with a couple different people selling some of my rental properties, putting them all into storage deals. It's like I'm going with the specialized route. So I think it's really cool that you've decided to specialize on that one type of product. And I think I actually know that you serve people better because you made that decision. That must have been hard though. Like what were some of the things that went into that decision when you made that decision to kind of, I don't want to say give up other kinds of products that you could sell, but how do you make a call like that?
Well, it was definitely not on my radar. It was kind of strange. At the time, again, this is 2016, I was a manager of a national division for another company. And life was great. I was doing good. I was making a ton of money, was managing and leading people and helping, a lot of people. And I was out for a run one morning and the impression came, it's time to start a company. And I said, no thanks, not for me, right? Just kept running. And, because up until that point, our industry is so heavily regulated that the idea of compliance and government oversight and those kinds of things, it always just kind of turned me off on owning my own mortgage company.
Yeah.
And anyway, a couple of weeks later, same thing. I'm out running one morning and same thing. Trevor, it's time. Start your company. And so I said, all right, I'll look into it. And oddly enough, as complex as it is, it just kind of fell into place. It was just the right thing to happen. And It just kind of fell into place. And similarly, as I'm working on setting the company up over that summer, same thing, impression just came one day, focus on reverse mortgages. And I said, sure. I mean, I've done 2 in my career, but why not? We'll do a reverse mortgage company. And early on, it was interesting. I know one of our main competitors in town actually went on radio and said, oh, this is a terrible idea. There's a company in town that just does reverse mortgages and they'll fail within a year kind of thing. You know what I mean? Because how can you serve your clients if you do just one product?
His radio is just to bash you?
Yeah, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, but it is what it is. But
interesting.
But oddly enough, that thing is proven to be our key to success is just that effort to do one thing, to try to be the very best at it, to be known as the guy that does just this one thing. And one of my clients that we were meeting with in Cedar City today, or my partners, is with another mortgage company. Mm-hmm. And that's kind of strange for us. Some of my very best partners are actually my competitors.
Interesting.
But because I don't actively compete against them for the same kind of clients they're going after, they refer their business to me. I'll refer some business to them, and that way it's kind of proven that that's the best route for us. So
it's so cool. I mean, we talk about it a lot. We debate it, and Ben's mentioned it. But when an industry like ours, or a business like we're in, where we're syndicating deals, a lot of times you hear like people that do every single asset class.
Yeah.
Syndicate apartments and
yes,
commercial.
Right.
And, yeah.
Right. And that's very common. And it's uncommon to just specialize in one. And even though technically our portfolio will be diversified among different properties all over, but it's technically the same asset class. But I think I see the value and the wisdom in us just doing this and knowing the game so well. I think if we just try to jump into apartments like right now, just because if there was an amazing deal, I think we would do it. But if we were jumped in and we don't have the experience, can we provide the same value? Can we ask for the same, cut or fees from our investors? Or can our partners trust us if we want to be like, yeah, give us a bunch of money, we're going to go do apartments. We have no experience doing it, but here you go.
I mean, we couldn't claim we couldn't claim specialty. We couldn't claim to have a unique value proposition over, there's plenty of syndicates that just buy storage units, but there's not many that specialize in it, which digressing off, but it is a really cool advantage. I think that's the logical advantage is people think of you as the go-to for something, which feels really good.
Yeah. Can I maybe interject here? We have listeners. Can you define a reverse mortgage?
That might be helpful at this point.
I mean, we're going to talk about it a lot, I'm sure, but maybe like, what is it? And that could give us some context.
Yeah. So the easiest way for me to explain this, because it most people do kind of have some level of confusion or mystery mystery around it.
Yeah.
But the simplest way to understand a reverse mortgage is it works exactly the same as a regular mortgage. The mechanics are the same. For example, when you go to buy a house, you go to the bank, you set up a 30-year fixed mortgage, right? You borrow the money, you buy your house, and now you make a payment to the bank. And that payment's going to pay a little bit of that principal until the loan's paid off over 30 years, right? But most of your payment is interest. The bank is charging you interest for the money you've borrowed, and that's what you're paying every month, right? On a reverse mortgage, the mechanics are exactly the same. The only difference is that the payment becomes, what's the word I want to use here? Deferrable. Meaning that as long as the homeowner lives in the home and they pay their basic property expenses like taxes and insurance, they could live until age 150 and they never have to make a payment to the bank, okay? What happens is they're still charged interest every month, just like any other mortgage, but that interest is added onto the balance of the mortgage. And so over time, the mortgage slowly grows instead of slowly trickling down to nothing. And so you mentioned, seniors, this is usually associated with seniors. And the reason for that is it's
a product only available to
seniors.
It's
a retirement tool, and so at least one of the homeowners has to be 62 or older. The other homeowner can be 18, right? But at least one of the spouses has to be 62 or older.
We've talked about marrying.
Has that happened?
Marrying a cougar for this product.
So I did have one situation.
Get into it.
Let's get to a dirty reverse mortgage story.
No.
We want to hear it all.
So
we told you it'd be exciting.
He was 72, she was 27, and we were looking at this option, and that was the concern. He's like, well, obviously I'm going to pass away before she does. Is she going to be protected? And the answer is yeah. As long as she lives in the home and pays the property taxes, she could live in
his wife.
His wife, yes.
Did you say 72 and 27?
Yep. She's 27. He was 72.
Local?
So,
that is not half your age plus 7.
Hey, they were happy. So what are you gonna do? So,
yeah, you're gonna leave that alone. Let them do their thing.
So that's the idea. Again, is it's a retirement tool. It's designed to allow people to use their largest asset. Right. For most of us, the vast majority of us, our home is both our largest asset, but it's also our largest expense.
Yes.
And so not only are they able to eliminate their monthly debt or their monthly burden of a mortgage, but they're able to use the equity that they built up in the home over their lifetime to live better, to eliminate their expenses, to consolidate debts, to pull cash out. And that's one of my favorite analogies. Your standard financial planner will always tell you, invest $200 to $300 a month in something safe and secure that you're going to get 5 to 10% return on. And then when you retire, you'll have plenty of money to live. Most of us don't do that, right? Most people don't have a 401k that's reliable. We won't get pensions. We won't have IRAs and those kinds of things. But what we're missing is that we're doing that already with a home.
Yeah.
When we buy a home, we're building wealth because every month we're putting a little bit of money into the equity of the home. The home's going to appreciate at 5 to 6% until we retire, so that when we retire, it's our largest asset. So,
and I'll chime in just because I'm a big fan of this, because I have family members that are candidates for this, because what happens is people's wealth gets trapped in a home, right? So you're looking around like, okay, we're retired. We made all this money over our lifetime. Where is it, right? Besides, obviously, we could go into Uncle Sam that takes his cut, but the majority of it is stuck in a house, right? If you don't want to sell the house, you can actually tap into it with a reverse mortgage. You can pull that money out and serve a mission, or put that money, we're talking like $500,000. You can put that money into other deals, right? Like into cash flowing things, and you never get kicked out of your house, because the way the loan's set up is you're never going to be so leveraged that you get foreclosed on, and legally the government can never kick you out of the house, even if you get upside down in it. So you always have a free place to live, basically.
So you're pulling cash out. It's like a cash out refi, so you can pull out tons. But you said you never make a payment on it,
right? Because again,
so you just pull your. So if I had $500,000 in equity, like he said, and there would be certain DTR or
you have to keep
LTV.
a DTR.
So then it's say, okay, they give me $250,000 cash, and I just never pay on it.
Yeah, let me give you an example. Because again, this is where people get really confused.
Ben buys the car he wants.
I would love
$250,000.
I've talked about Ponzi scheming reverse mortgages.
How?
Find the old people, reverse mortgage them, put them in your Ponzi scheme, and then it's never ending, dude.
There's plenty of people to fill your neck. Okay, anyways.
So let me give you an example that kind of illustrates this. So let's say you have somebody who has a $400,000 home. It's owned free and clear. They have no payments on it. That's great. But they're also living, statistically, they're probably living on about $1,800 a month in income. And so they're house rich, cash poor, right? By doing a reverse mortgage, let's say, depending on their age and interest rates, they're able to borrow $200,000 against this home. And so they get $200,000 against this mortgage or this home for $400,000. But they have no payments for life. So what's going to happen? Fast forward a year from now, if the mortgage itself has let's say a 6% interest rate, because rates are kind of high right now. If the mortgage has a 6% interest rate, their mortgage balance will grow from $200,000 to $212,000 over a year, right? But their home, their $400,000 home is going to appreciate at probably an average of 4 to 5%. Let's just say 4% is a low conservative estimate. So their $400,000 home appreciates at 4%. It's now worth $416,000. They've taken $200,000 from the bank, borrowed it, right? They've made 0 payments, and yet they've still grown $4,000 of equity year over year.
The appreciation keeps up with the interest.
So you're not going to, technically, based on historical house appreciation averages, you're not going to be losing too much.
Right. And a lot of people worry about that, obviously, because of the 2008 crash. Yes, there are times when our home values can come down, right? But historically, even if you consider the 2008 crash, we've averaged 4.8% appreciation since 1970. Real estate builds wealth, right? Properties build wealth.
Yeah.
And so the idea that I'm going to go upside down on this home long term is very, very unlikely. Yes, there may be times where values really plummet, but the market always comes back for real estate because we always need a place to live, right? Yeah. And so that's the basic idea, kind of like what you're saying, is that the home's appreciation is essentially covering your mortgage charges. So you're able to take that money and live without the burden of the payment.
And when you get to this phase of life, right? And I make the inappropriate joke about, coming up with some sort of scheme because I'm so envious of this type of product, right? That we're ineligible for it till we're 62. But like when you get to that age, your priorities shift because what you need to do is live a life with no regrets, right? I feel like one of the hallmark sins, and this is very controversial, is that we need to get out of debt and that we've been told that. But in my humble opinion, you can serve more people and you can do more good if you take on some good debt. And I would say a reverse mortgage is qualified as healthy debt because you're never going to be homeless. The government protects it, and you can use that money to invest or serve in the twilight years, in the last years of, last decades of your life, let's say. And so it's a way that you don't have to move out or downsize, but you can still leverage all the wealth that you've built. And I love it.
Case in point, one of the clients, we closed on a loan this week. Basic scenario, he gets $1,300 a month in Social Security for the rest of his life. That's it, right? He's at a point in his life where he can't go back to work. He's not going to go work at Walmart or Culver's or somewhere to make ends meet, right? He's making $1,300 a month, period. Yeah. And $650 of that money goes towards paying his mortgage payment right now. He is surviving on $700 a month. That's gas, insurance, groceries. You know what I mean?
That's very sad.
Yeah, and so the ability to eliminate his mortgage payment and get him a line of credit for $50,000 or $60,000 that he can use as a reserve is life-changing for somebody in that situation. And so again, we talked about this of how can this be a strategic tool for people? How can they use this as a way to grow their wealth even further? And we kind of mentioned, okay, so take $100,000 out of your home. You have no mortgage payment on that now, and invest that in rental properties or storage units or something that's going to cash flow for you and leave a legacy for your kids. You know what I mean? And so it's a way for them to not only alleviate those burdens, but also grow their legacy, spend more time with their family, have more freedom and flexibility to enjoy life and the health that they have. So
Yeah.
Love it. So what are the naysayers like? If someone, your worst enemy, was over here and he was like,
It's a great question.
what are people saying against this?
Yeah.
And I want to know what they're saying, and I want to know what the counter is.
So that's why I really appreciate these kind of platforms. And you mentioned, we do quite a few of these, podcasts and those kinds of things, because education is really kind of the key of our industry. The problem that we face as an industry is history. The original reverse mortgage was kind of a train wreck. The reason it was not a great product is because it was designed with the bank in mind. The idea being that when President Reagan signed it into law originally in the 80s, there was this large demographic of people who had no income. They needed to retire, but they had no money to do so. All they had was their home and their equity in their home. And so the law was put into place, the reverse mortgage was created to say, okay, yeah, sure, we'll give you some money now. When you pass away, we'll just take the home and we'll take care of it, right? And so over the next 20 or 30 years, 25 years, the issue is that the loan was designed with really high loan amounts and really high interest rates. And so if you did a reverse mortgage and you had it for 10 or 15 years, the mortgage would grow so fast because of that large interest additions on the old loan that your home was upside down. And so when you passed away, there was nothing left over. Now, you're protected, with a reverse mortgage. Again, if your home does go upside down, that's totally fine. Mm-hmm. Stay there for the rest of your life and you're good to go. But the issue is that this was happening on almost all of these loans. The loans were going upside down when the homeowner passed away or had to move out to go into care facilities or something. There was nothing left over for the family. And so that was one of the major issues is that it became known as a tool for the bank to get your home.
Yeah.
Right? Because the mortgage was growing too fast. The other issue that comes up is that in the old days, the loan didn't always protect the spouse. And so we kind of joked about the 72 and 27-year-old. Nowadays, she's protected. As long as they're married, she can stay in this home for the rest of her life as well. She's good to go. But in the old days, that wasn't the case. You both had to be 62 or older, or you couldn't be on the loan. So if he was 62, she was 61, they did the loan. 25 years later, he passes away. She's in her 80s. And she essentially gets foreclosed on. They took the home from her because it was both upside down and she was not protected. And so for obvious reasons, it was kind of a nightmare. When it went wrong, it really went wrong. Yeah. You know what I mean? And so, but the good news is that over the past 10, 12 years, they've been making major modifications to address these issues. And so that's why I say we still call it a reverse mortgage or a HECM. But it really is a much different product than it used to be. It functions far differently than it used to.
I'm glad you mentioned this because growing up, I don't know why, I just have a scene of me as a young kid going past someone's house and maybe my dad was like talking to me about it, but it was like reverse mortgages were bad. Mm-hmm. And that's like, there's just this feeling around it that I get, and I don't know exactly where it comes from, but it sounds like that's exactly where it came from is back when, several years ago when I was really, really much younger, it would have been like there were some of these things happening.
Yeah. Yeah, and like I say, when that happens, I mean, that is the worst case scenario. The idea of a bank foreclosing on an 80-something-year-old woman because her husband died, I mean, how could you get worse than that?
It's not, right.
And so, again, that's why they address some of those things specifically so that doesn't happen anymore.
So because for some reason, I used to think, like, reverse mortgage, only someone who was desperate and had nowhere else to go, and then this is their last resort.
Yeah.
Did you have a thought? You were going to say? Okay. No, that was it. Yeah. So now with that in mind, I want to hear like the counters. Like, can you change my mind?
Yeah. So I'm glad you bring that up because again, that's one of the stigmas that's falling away, is that this is for somebody who has no other options. They're a flat tire away from losing everything, right? Nowadays, most of our clients don't need this loan. They do it strategically because it's a better financial way for them to plan for the future. And so we actually have many clients who are multimillionaires and homes are free and clear. They've got money in the bank. They've got money invested. And so people are like, why would they do this, right?
Right.
So some of the reasons that a reverse mortgage becomes a better lending option in retirement is number one, the flexibility, as we mentioned. The loan mechanically is exactly the same. And so if you want to keep making payments, great, make your payment. It will do exactly the same thing as a 30-year fixed would do. But the beauty of being able to say, you know what, it's Christmas, we're taking our family on a cruise, we're not going to make a mortgage payment this month. And you have that flexibility. That's awesome, right? Beyond that, though, I gave you the example earlier of somebody who has a $400,000 home, right? Most people wouldn't take $200,000 out immediately and go blow it, right? What most people do is they'll set up a growth line of credit. And what that means is that they have a $400,000 home, they have $200,000 that they can borrow, but they don't need it. Great, leave it in the home, leave it in the mortgage. And the nice thing is that $200,000 will grow by the same interest rate that they have on the mortgage. And so if they have a 6% interest rate on the mortgage, that $200,000 line of credit will also grow at 6%. And so after the first year, they don't have a $212,000 mortgage, they have $212,000 of cash that's available to them. And so if they just leave that money kind of like, again, almost like a retirement planning future fund, you know what I mean?
Right.
After 1 year, it's 212. After 2 years, you're 225, 237, et cetera, et cetera. And so this money that's available to them just continues to grow until they need it. And the beauty of it is it's never taxable. And so if they showed up one day and said, I need $100,000, great, here it is. Government's not going to touch any
debt.
of it. It's debt.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can't be taxed.
And so it's beneficial to them to avoid taxes. It's beneficial for the kids who will inherit the equity that's in the home, because again, if they took that $100,000 and invested it, again, it's building their wealth that transfers to their family when they pass away. So
something I feel like it's kind of the spirit of reverse mortgage is like it makes me smile when I hear people say, I don't want my kids to get an inheritance. I want them to have a bunch of memories and experiences with me. And that's kind of what I see it as. It's like, yeah, if you lived a frugal life for the last 4 decades of your life, you could give your kids more money, but that's not what they want.
Right.
They want time with you. And so it's basically like, they're still going to get some inheritance. It's not like you're squandering their inheritance, but it's a tool where you can stay in your house, still have the family reunion at your house without having to downsize to an apartment when you're getting old, and you can spend more time with your family and serve and even invest. Like you said, it can be a tool. It's not always a defense mechanism. It can be an aggressive thing too, if that's your personality. But
it's funny because we usually come into two sides of the aisle on this. We have some clients. I remember one guy specifically in Florida, because I asked him, I'm like, tell me about your family, your kids, who's going to inherit your stuff, and he says, well, I've got a son, but what the blank do I? I don't want to leave anything to him. They just sit around playing video games all day.
Yeah.
He's like, I want to spend it all before I die. So there's people that are along those lines, but the most of them, especially here in Utah, for whatever reason, cling to that idea of I want to leave as much as I can to my kids.
Yeah.
And the funny thing about that is that if you talk to your kids, they're the opposite. They don't want that. I've lost both of my parents now. And when I look at it, exactly like you're saying, I don't want the $5 in an envelope for each of my kids. I want you to come here for Christmas and be with my kids, right? Yeah. I want you to make memories with my kids. I don't want you to send us $20 to go to Disneyland with. I want you to go to Disneyland with us, you know what I mean? And so that's what I try to encourage people to see is that, look, if you're living on ramen noodles and canned beans because you think you're benefiting your kids by leaving them a few extra $1,000, you're missing the point of what legacy really is.
Yeah.
Legacy is the memories, it's the time, it's the experiences, right? So.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
So there's obviously a big intrinsic value to this for you. Like we talked about some of the logical reasons for this, but it sounds like there's also like a spiritual pull too, and like a why behind it. Maybe speak about that and why that has propelled you to build this business that's now growing.
Yeah. So it's funny you say that. I mean, I mentioned kind of the motivation or the inspiration I received to start the company because, again, it was not on my radar. It was not. I always wanted to be an entrepreneur, but I kind of looked at mortgages as my pathway to becoming an entrepreneur. I didn't realize that this is where I would do it.
Yeah.
And so that was kind of the start of my journey, I guess you'd call it. But, I tell people all the time that being self-employed has stretched and pushed and pulled me far more than anything else I've ever done. More than, being a father, more than being a husband, more than being education or anything else. Being an entrepreneur is taxing, but it's also extremely rewarding. And initially, like I say, when I started the company, that was my vision, was, hey, I'll just do my thing. I'll be that guy in Southern Utah that does this and does it the very best. And little by little, as we began to have successes, I felt that kind of push to, hey, you've got to grow, bring more people into this. And I resisted it for a long time. I didn't want to do it. Didn't want to hire. Didn't want to grow.
Because?
I don't know, selfish, I guess. I just didn't want to babysit, I guess was the impression I had. I didn't want to grow the company. I didn't want to scale the company because I had misconceptions and limiting beliefs that it meant that I would be taking other people onto my back, right?
Okay.
And since then, of course, I kind of got over those limiting beliefs and those, that pride and that
fixed mindset.
Yes, yeah, and kind of expanded that, and it's been wonderful. And so, listening to those impressions are key, especially when you're, in life, when you're making big decisions. Listening to those feelings are so important. And so, as we've grown the company, we've brought more and more people on. It is so rewarding. You realize that you're not carrying them; you're just carrying each other. At any given point, you're lifting and helping one another. And kind of backtracking a little bit, as you mentioned, the intrinsic or the real value behind what I do is the difference I'm able to make for people, aside from being successful and those kinds of things, which is great. But really what pushes me, or what pushed me originally, was the idea of going to a loan closing and having somebody cry on my shoulder and saying, thank you so much, you've changed my life, which I really hadn't experienced previously.
It's different than any other loan, for the reasons we talked about.
More life-changing than anything else I can offer.
Yeah.
And by the same token, bringing people in like Caitlin. We had talked about Caitlin, who's a member of my team.
Let's highlight Caitlin.
Caitlin's phenomenal.
Her mom was my English teacher.
Okay.
Oh, good.
In 6th, 7th grade.
She's my BNI president. She's amazing.
Wonderful.
Yeah. So Caitlin is a great example. She was in her early 20s. She was a florist at Lynn's, and she loves plants, right? She's a botanist through and through. But I was getting to a point where I needed an assistant, and so I put it on Facebook, and her mom saw it on Facebook. She calls Caitlin up. She's like, hey, you've got to call this guy right now. And she brought me a resume, and she was the only person that applied. So I hired her.
That's pretty lucky to get someone like Caitlin on the first shot.
What kind of mortgage experience do you have?
Yeah. What's a mortgage?
Lots of flowers?
Yeah. And so it was very much one of those kind of experiences. But I mean, when you find the right personality, it doesn't matter what they're doing, right? If you find the right personality, you can train somebody to do anything, and that was Caitlin to a T.
It's a big takeaway.
Yeah. So
it's a good one for business.
You just slipped that in there, but I think that's a big deal, is people and character over skill set, right? Because you could have found someone that has been a secretary in a mortgage office before, and Caitlin would beat the brakes off them because she just has that character of caring. Like, she just cares about her work.
Yeah.
So I think that's a big takeaway. I wanted to highlight that.
Someone who's willing to learn. Yeah. Willing to be taught, get after it.
Well, and desire, and that's one of the things that I've learned too as an entrepreneur, is you cannot teach desire. Somebody either wants it or they don't. And if they want it, great, you can teach them anything.
Yes.
If they don't want it, you can't drag them forward. You know what I mean? And so that's something to identify with when we're building our teams, is we got to find people who really want it and are willing to work for it. But yeah, so where was I?
Well, you're talking about,
bringing
there's two sides of intrinsic rewards. The one is the people crying on your shoulder because you unlock their wealth for them. And the second one is building a team and the reward that brings.
For sure. And there again, and I don't, it's funny because high compliments to my team, wonderful people. And they compliment me sometimes, and I'm just like, I I feel weird about that. Right? I don't like it when people give me compliments, because I think so highly of them. And especially over this last year, as interest rates have gone through the roof and our industry's gotten tough.
Yes.
You know what I mean? It's phenomenal to me to think that we haven't lost anyone. We've got our team, and they're soldiering through the hard times.
Let's talk about that too, because
It was on my mind.
I think for people realizing how hard this industry has gotten hit is a really big deal. That, I have family who would be entering into a reverse mortgage if rates were better, but because of rates, they're not, right? So, I know you've made sacrifices. Tell us how you kept a team together through this downtime, let's call it.
That's a good question.
And why? Because a lot of people we have come on the podcast, they actually advise us to cut people early in a hard time. So I think it's controversial, and people might challenge you.
See, and I really struggle with that, because from a business standpoint, and I've got my business degrees and those kinds of things. I know that's the right answer in most situations. But early on, as interest rates went from 2.5% to now 7%, right, over the past
and climbing.
Yeah. It became apparent to me really early on last year that we're gonna have to figure out what we're gonna do here. Do we keep our team? Do we let them go? Because we're gonna have an extended period of time where we're not gonna have enough business for everybody, right? Yeah. And I just have felt strongly this entire time to keep everybody. And again, it goes against my personal logic. It goes against my personal experience. But it's something I've felt, and I following my feelings before has always worked out for me. So we're doing it again. But my impression for the reason for that is that I personally have been through these kind of markets before. I started in 2006, and then the economy crashed. So I've done this before. And what I've learned is that the market always comes back. Downtimes always return with good times. And the analogy I use for my team is it's a lot like the ocean, right? When the waves come in and they go out and they come in, the further the wave goes out, the further it comes back in is usually the right analogy for a market. And so as hard as the market is right now, understanding that the longer it goes like this, the harder it gets, the better it will be on the other side. And so I think that's the reason why I'm trying to keep my team intact, is because when things do come back and rates come back down, we're going to need everybody we have plus some. You know what I mean? And so I don't want to be starting from scratch, rebuilding a team that I've decimated by letting them go after, the hard times. So.
That's a big takeaway I want to highlight, is that markets come back, but people don't always come back. Right? If you let someone go, and I think it's just to highlight, you said high compliments to your team. And I think any business owner we have in the chair would say the same thing. I don't think anyone's going to badmouth their team. But to sacrifice, like I know you have over this time, that's a true compliment to your team, because you're backing it up with dollars and with action, right? Yeah. And it's hard. And I can't relate, because we're always in service industry. We're a little bit in higher demand, but like around Christmas time, we have like a week or two where it's slow. And it's really hard to keep all of our guys that are freaking slammed all summer busy through Christmas time, right? So luckily we're not as affected by seasonality as other businesses and locations. But the point is the same, is that you really hate losing people during hard times. And it's really impressive that you've done it.
And that's really, again, where I have to tip my hat to them, is because it's been a hard year. You know what I mean? And I remember what it's like to go 2 or 3 months with zero paychecks. You know what I mean? I did that early on in my career. And so I really admire and appreciate my team. But I think that the point of what's happening there is it's the vision. I think as effective leaders, it's so important for us to instill the vision of what we're doing and why we're doing it. And that's what I've tried to do with my team. And so if there's anything I'm doing right, I hope it's that. But it's this idea that, the understanding that what we're doing to help people is meaningful. Because when you think about it, the people that suffer the most from recessions, from inflation, are retirees, because they have little to no options. You know what I mean? If you're on a fixed monthly income in your 70s and 80s, you can't go start a business. You can't go get another job. You're just kind of at the mercy of the market. You know what I mean? And so again, this idea that what we do makes a difference in the lives of the people that we serve, and the idea that the people that can get through the hard times will be the people that benefit by the good times when they come down, because they always come back, right?
Yeah. Right.
And so I think that's I don't know, maybe just a little bit of my experience over the past year of how we keep a team intact when it's so hard.
Well, I mean, I think there's wisdom. I know there's an example of companies that have taken on that strategy, knowing or having the confidence that things will bounce back, and they're, you know, so much further ahead than their competitors that did the opposite. And one thing I was thinking of as an employee perspective, and as a company, maybe as a business owner, and you guys could let me know your comments on this, but I think word would get out about like, oh, Trevor, don't work for that guy. The second we have one slow month, it'll just let you go. So why would I work for his company? I'm just going to work for someone who's going to believe in me, and we're going to ride some of these ups and downs. And you have to, the accounting side of me thinks of like, in these really high highs, like you got to make sure you take a little cream and put it away. And I don't know your strategy and what other, I do find it interesting on different business strategies with that when they're in a very up and down business. Construction's one of those, super high, and then you can have really big lows. And how do people strategize? How do people handle that? But anyways, I think going back, it would speak volumes to me as if I were working for you or others, you know, as you are ready to grow and expand and you want to bring more people on, thinking like, yeah, I mean, this is the company you want to work for, because when things get hard, we're going to make it through together. Yeah. We have contingencies in place. We have some reserves. It's not going to be easy, but we're going to get it through. And I'm not just going to literally let everyone go the second it gets hard. Like all those tech company jokes we see on Instagram.
Yeah.
Those jokes are so funny on Instagram about where they're just joking around about how like, oh, today's been so hard. I just had to let go 80% of my company.
Yeah. We'll have to tag Ostenoso. Yeah. He's this funny guy who posts, it's a digression, but he posts all these funny memes about like a tech bro laid off 80% of his staff. Now he's begging them to come back. Anyways, it's just funny.
Funny videos.
But I think one thing Callan was talking, I was thinking about your team, and one thing is your team talks behind your back really positively about you. And it's something I envy. Like, I think I would hope my team does too, but I don't know if they would as high praise as your team gives you. So tell me, like, how do you carve out the time to build those relationships with your team and also instill the vision with your team with everything you have going on?
This is a hard one.
It is.
Reason I say that is because, admittedly, I'm terrible at this naturally. I mean, I'm an introverted person. My work style is come in, close the door, and get to work, and I'll work a solid 8-9 hours. You know what I mean?
Interesting.
One of my natural strengths is consistency. It's easy for me to be consistent. What's hard for me is getting outside of my natural tendencies to be extroverted, to build connection with people. Those kinds of things is where I struggle. And I guess, so my answer to your question is twofold. Number one, it goes back to the idea of just hire people whose strengths overcome your weaknesses, right? Okay. And so people like Caitlin are wonderful in building connection. Aubrey, yes. and you know, Aubrey and Perlin and others on my team that kind of handle that side of things, where they handle the company parties and they handle the company, you know, get-togethers and those kinds of things. Because for me, I'm terrible at it, number one, and two, it's just it's just not what I do. And so hiring people that complement your weaknesses, that are stronger where you are weak, is one thing. The other thing is just being, I guess, genuine. My team knows who I am, you know what I mean? And so they, hopefully, I still worry about it because I want them to feel loved and provided for and those kinds of things. But I'm just not very good at expressing those kinds of things openly. Yeah. And so they know who I am. They know what they get from me. But beyond that, it's just people like to be mentored and they like to be heard.
Yeah.
Right. And so I try to share any wisdom I can with them, things that I'm learning personally in my life. I share with them. We have a book of the month where we'll sit down and we'll talk about what we're learning together. We have quarterly one-on-ones so that they can tell me what's going on in their lives, and I can hear, what's important to them, those kinds of things. So I guess that's all I could share. You're asking me, I really don't know, because I feel like I'm terrible at this area, but they tend to think differently.
You're stronger than you think. And I think I just see it as a big, as a big priority or issue for business owners to convey their love and appreciation. And I think it's a really good, those are two good tips, right? Genuine. And I like also mentoring, right? I think those are really big ones that that will probably go a really long ways with people. And I think about myself and I'm like, man, I wish I could convey my love and appreciation for my team, but I know that I don't, or I do, but maybe not to the extent that I really feel it. And it's because I only have so much bandwidth, and then when I'm not working, it's like I owe it to my wife to be with her or my family, it's like, and I'll just going on a tangent, like I'm an extrovert. So for me, like it would count for me if I invited a coworker over every weekend, like that would be fine with me, but I don't know that my wife would handle that super well, right? And so, because I can spend quality time with multiple people at a time where other people need to have more one-on-one. So it's just it's an issue I run into, and I think hopefully our paintball activity this last weekend helped, but I just admire the way that your team knows you love and care about them, and I hope that I can, continue to move in that direction. So thank you.
I mean, it's twice in a row we've had entrepreneurs that had like these crazy impressions, like to start a business. Isn't that kind of our last episode? Very similar. Just like you said, you're just running and you're like, start a business, and that's I find that kind of interesting. But the takeaway for me is just following just those impressions in life. And it's something I mentioned our last episode was just not worrying too much like about everything, but your things will work out. Like there's a plan for you. You're going to get to where you want to be. And but anyways.
There's an experience that you remind me of, and I don't want to sound fruity or weird with this.
Fruity.
But there have been times, as I mentioned, as an entrepreneur, I've grown more than any other experience in my life. There have been times in my career, in my business, where it's felt as if 60-year-old Trevor is calling back to 40-year-old Trevor, saying, keep going, get through this, you know what I mean? And I think the point of that is that, like you say, there's purpose. There can be purpose in what we do, right? It's not just about making money and being successful and those kinds of things. But when we can use what we do to make the world better and to help people live better, both our employees and our clients and our community, then there is good around what we're doing. And so again, I don't want to sound weird about that, but that's honestly what it's felt like sometimes is like the future version of me is trying to say, Trevor, keep at it. You're gonna do this, dude. Don't give up, because it's hard, but it's totally rewarding. And so,
it's perspective, right? Yeah. And I don't know. I like that. I don't think it's corny at all. I mean, I think thinking of your 60-year-old self and how you would see your life is a good way to base decisions, right? And if you're 60, think of your 100-year-old self. But if you're 100, think of your self from heaven looking back, right? But the point is like use no regrets or living life to the fullest as your guide. And I think that's what you're saying is basically, how am I going to look back and how am I going to be happy with it, right? How am I going to sit on the rocking chair and be like, I have complete closure, and even if I failed, even if I messed up, I did my very best, and my conscience is happy with itself, and my inner, that divine part of me that God put in me to stretch and grow and become is satisfied, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, and I love this. This brings up a practice that I tried this year. So since I was in my 20s, I had the practice of setting long-term life vision types of things where I would say, okay, I'm 75 now. Looking back on my life, what have I accomplished up to this point? I'm 90 now. What have I accomplished? This was the first year where I actually did that from the standpoint of I'm 150 now, right? I've been dead for 60 years. What did my impact do in the world? You know what I mean? And that was weird, to consider, because I think that's the reality, is that for the vast majority of us, once your grandchildren die, your memory dies. You know what I mean? And so the idea of what I'm doing today is building a legacy that's going to last 50 years after I die. That was really helpful to kind of open my mind to how can I do more in the world. So
it's big picture thinking.
Yeah,
that's quite the vision, trying to outlive your grandkids with your memory.
right.
That's good. That's a great exercise. I've never done that one.
It's really powerful.
So
I mean, I love the idea in general of thinking about that. Have you, zooming back to your comment about when, what did you say, 60 or 70-year-old Trevor has to call you? That's probably because you're going through something hard or a trial.
Sure.
Could you elaborate a little bit, if you want, on maybe what some of these trials are? And you already kind of gave us how you're able to get out of those, but I think it's good for us when we're talking about business and entrepreneurs to make sure we talk about some of those hard times, and not all about the fruity, the good stuff. It's another, what do they call it when same word, different meaning? I just did that. Anyways, rappers do that a lot. But yeah, so if you feel comfortable, if you have something in mind, maybe talk about some of those trials, and then how you get out of it. But we know that one of your tools to get out of some of these trials is having 7-year-old Trevor call. But
Yeah.
anyways.
So there's a couple of instances that come to my mind with this question, but it kind of goes back to those original jogs. You know what I mean? Again, I starting this company was something I didn't want to do if it wasn't for, I would call God telling me to do it. Yeah. Obviously, that I wouldn't have done it. Without feeling that purpose and that meaning, I wouldn't be where I am. But there were a couple of times. The first couple of years were difficult, right? I was struggling to make it work. And
Why?
Financially.
Okay.
For all the reasons that the naysayers said it would fail, right?
The guy on the radio?
Yeah, the idea of here I am.
One product.
Right, one product. My first, second year in the business or in this industry as a specialist doing just one loan, and I don't have a name yet. I don't have that reputation yet of the guy that does the one thing. And so times were lean and tough. And I had
What year was it?
This would be about 2018.
Okay.
Yeah. And so I did have a team. I had 5 or 6 people that were working with us. And I remember one week in particular, 2 instances, sorry, not the same week, but one week in particular, payroll was coming out on Friday. It was about $5,000. And I had $2,500 of credit card limit left, right? So not only do I not have money, I only have $2,500 of credit left to meet a $5,000 payroll. And I just woke up one morning and I went for a walk. And again, I'm following the voice and the impressions, just kind of walking through this street and that street. And I said, look, I'm at peace. If we fail this week, if we go out of business this week, okay. But I don't think that's what you want, right? And so I'm just having this conversation with God and myself and saying, I'm here because you brought me here, right? I'm here because you led me to be here. And if this is going to work out, it's going to be up to you, because I have nothing else to do at this point to make it happen, pull us out of bankruptcy. And sure enough, went to work that day, or it was the next day, and a check showed up out of nowhere. It just showed up. I wasn't expecting it, and it was enough to get through payroll that week. And then we had some more fundings and stuff come through, and it was fine. But another instance, maybe a couple of months earlier or after, I can't remember, same thing. It's like, we're just not getting there. I'm working every day. I'm doing it every day. I'm doing the best I know how to do. And one day I just got so burned up and frustrated that I left my office. I got in my car, and I'm driving down the road. I'm just screaming. Well, I'm yelling, "What's happening? I'm here. I'm where you told me to be. I did what you told me to do, what I felt inspired to do. Why isn't this working?" kind of thing, right? Just super frustrated with it.
Yes.
And it just kind of blew my top and let it all out. And I got back to the office, and I'd missed a call from a client. So I call the client back, and we get a new loan, and it's like, okay, everything's going to be fine.
Just
you know what I mean?
a little bit at a time getting you across.
But that is where you find the breakthroughs. And I think that is the key takeaway of those experiences, is that the hero's journey will push you beyond your limit. And once you've made the commitment to say, you know what, I'm pushing a little bit further, then it lets up and it lets go, and things start to work. But that's where most people fail, is they get almost to that limit and they say, it's too hard, I don't want it. And they back away.
Yeah.
And they miss the opportunity that was waiting for them right on the other side of that door, right on the other side of they call it failure, right? When you're working out, you do your reps until you fail. And that's where you get the benefit, the maximum benefit of that exercise, is you go until your body literally says, I can't go any further.
Yeah.
Right. So
Wow, really powerful.
The hero's journey. I mean, what you're talking about is the price, right? This comes with a price, and I think it's just so simple, but it's just such a big deal it's good job security for someone that's running because the price it costs to specialize in reverse mortgage.
Right.
There's a price. Right? I know the price to be a mover, and it's high, right? Yeah. But it's good job security because I'm willing to pay the price. Other people are willing to pay the price to some extent, but few are willing to pay the price to make the necessary sacrifices and get out of your comfort zone in so many different ways, right?
Yeah.
And same with storage investments. So
yeah, barrier to entry, the term we hear a lot with that.
Yeah. Yes.
I feel like I hear these stories, and it's these really hard moments, and usually financially when it comes to any trial with business. And those companies that break through, it's like they break through it, and then they do super well. I worked for Holbrook Asphalt, and if you know the Holbrook story, they were like a company trying to grow and struggling to make it, and Treg mortgaged his house. He wasn't old enough to reverse mortgage his house to make payroll, right? And I've heard people working there at the time that were just some people left the company because they didn't feel like they were going to make it, and then they bust through, and they're just a very, very successful company. And it's like anyone who would have left would just like, man, I wish we would have stayed, kind of thing, And I find that so cool, and the connections and the parallels between all these businesses and these trials, and having to go through this, the price, and then have those rewards. But
so I call it the suck, because it is. If you in the lives of successful people I've studied, and not only successful people, but historically and scripturally, you see this pattern everywhere, right? The idea for me and for everybody that I really look at is that when you start on a new venture, you have this initial high, right? It's like, yes, I'm going to do this. I'm passionate about it. It's going to work out. And that doesn't last very long, but it lasts a little while. And it's immediately after that, the suck sets in. And the suck is that extended period of time where you essentially have to prove yourself, right? Things get hard, things get challenging. You begin to question yourself. The market begins to question you. Everything seems like it's fighting against you. But beyond the suck is where the reward comes, where the success trajectory just skyrockets, right? And like I say, whether you're talking about athletes or you're talking about businesses and entrepreneurs, that tends to be the pattern for all of us, right? You have initial excitement, followed by your long extended period of suck, and then you have the reward. And again, most people give up in the suck because it's hard. It's named that for a reason, right? It's difficult. But it's the commitment to say, you know what, I don't care. Another analogy I give is that if I feel like I'm heading for a cliff, what I've learned in my life and my experience is the best thing to do is to start running, right? If you're looking at a cliff because you're doing something you feel you believe in, and it doesn't seem to be working, and so it feels like you're going off a cliff, the best thing to do is just run at it. Just commit and go. Every time I've done that, every time I've been faced with a cliff and taken the next step, that's where the reward always comes from.
It's incredible.
So
Yeah.
I think of a direct parallel. Rob Christensen, we had on the podcast, and he said, like, when he was bleeding in his business, he was like negative $300 in his bank account, and then he's like, "That's when I was supposed to cut my arm and bleed even more. Like I was supposed to dump more blood into this."
Yep.
And it's the same thing, and I think it's so powerful, and it's cool to hear it in another perspective as well. Like another thing, that analogy or that pattern, I feel like that fits perfectly into marriages as well.
Oh, for sure.
And relationships.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I was thinking, because you have like the high the honeymoon phase, you would call it, and then trials, and then there's rewards, and sometimes you go through, like, I think there's the macro version maybe of a marriage where you have that reward with your kids or your grandkids down 7-year-old Trevor would feel, and then it's like, but then you have those micro ones that you'll have, those little moments when you hold your kid for the first time, and then you're like so frustrated because they're keeping you up all night, and then like another moment because they tell you I love you for the first time, or they give you a hug, and it's like you just get those little moments, but then it's technically a really hard thing, and it's actually so hard that it prevents a lot of people from doing it, even starting, even trying.
Yeah.
So anyways,
I think of disruption is something that you're talking about, like getting out of your comfort zone, and talk about running towards the cliff. I've told this one a couple of times, but it's like the difference between the bison and the cows. If bison see the rainstorm coming, they run through it and push through it faster, and the cows run away and it stays with them. And it's just like these problems, they fester when you try to bury them, and when you confront your biggest issue or start the day with your hardest task, that's when it starts to get momentum in the right direction, right? When you confront, those things you don't want to.
cool.
You'll see that I'm a metaphor guy. I see life in metaphors.
I like metaphors.
Good.
My brothers used to be into four wheelers. You know what I mean? They'd buy like 400 EXs, and
they like the toys.
racing. Yeah.
Yes.
And so they'd do some pretty cool stuff. They'd go out riding all the time, and so one of my brothers, he could ride a wheelie all the way down the street, and I just thought, man, that's so cool. How do you do that? You know what I mean? And he explained the way you learn how to do that is you wheelie over, right? Your first time, you just intentionally dump it. You just go all the way over so that you know what the worst case scenario is. And that's kind of the same thing that you're talking about, is when you're facing hard things, think through what the worst case scenario is. What does bankruptcy really look like? You know what I mean? Can you deal with that? And if you can, awesome, go for it, because the odds are that you're not going to fail. You're more likely to fail if you go tentatively, but if you go full into it, the odds are you're going to succeed. And so just go, right?
Yeah.
So
Investment and commitment.
yeah.
I love that. I was just thinking of the rugby analogy. They say if you don't go as hard as you can, you're going to get hurt.
Yeah.
So if you want to try to play timid, you're going to get hurt.
That's the best way to get hurt.
Yeah, and
Totally.
it's like a dichotomy. It's a paradox, I guess.
Oh, that's a fact. If you're running into someone and you hesitate, you're gonna get crunched. And if you run full speed, you can take out and hurt a lot bigger guys than you.
Ben has no issue running full speed in basketball or football. You've never had
it's
that
like
problem,
pretty much
have you?
all I was good for was just like, that's why I have such bad posture, because my neck is still crunched from just like full speed ramming into people. Yes. Anyways, don't get us started on the glory days, but
Yes.
this has been
Awesome.
seriously special, and I feel like it's like it's just so cool to look at Heritage Reverse Mortgage and the impact it has. And I think hopefully everyone listening has had the same experience as Callan, where you started thinking it was going to be boring, but it's blown your mind with how amazing it is, and how in one transaction, one special thing, it can unlock people's wealth. So I've loved talking about heritage, and I've also loved talking about just you as Trevor, as the person, as the entrepreneur. So I've taken away a lot about, just things that I want to apply in my life, my business. So I really appreciate you being here, man.
Well, and likewise, this is one of the funnest parts of being in business is you start to rub shoulders with other entrepreneurs. You start to see people that are in the same journey that you're in. And it's a lot of fun. And so I've had the same thought for you, since you started your company, because we started roughly the same time. When did you start yours?
Yeah. I was doing it as a side hustle the whole time, but 16 or 17.
Yeah. So about that same time, we started seeing each other at the luncheons and the realtor stuff.
Yeah.
And so it's exciting to see other people thrive. It's exciting to grow up together in business and to see other businesses take off. So excited for you guys.
Well, I'm grateful you educated me on it. I love to learn, and so I know it's kind of a joke. I worry about other people, with reverse mortgages more than myself, for the record. But it's...
I'm telling you, by the time we get to retirement in 20 or 30 years, it'll be as common as a 401k.
Yeah.
Everybody will do it.
Yeah, I'm grateful for the education, and for everything that we've learned and talked about today. But it's crazy because how just that it's a misconception, but how I perceived from the way I had things come into my life, like the way I heard things or whatever. But like Ben, he's like super excited about reverse mortgages. I'm like, why?
I have the calendar marked in 33 years on my birthday. Like, I'm getting it.
Well, and he has for so long. Like, we'd be driving in the car and he'll just go off and how excited he is about a reverse mortage. And
have I really?
Remember when you were telling me
I gave you the scoop before?
Yeah.
Okay. There you go.
You could said the same thing. How dude, I'd get one right now. If I could get one, I'd be getting it right now. I want all my family to get reverse mortgages. Ben's telling everybody, but
see, that's what we're after. On Facebook, we kill it. Our audience is great. On Instagram, we're working. We'll get there.
Yes. Yeah. But anyways, thank you so much again for being here and sharing your wisdom.
For sure.
Thanks for coming on the show.
Cool.